Welcome to the Think for Yourself Clubhouse. I am Bill Martin and my co-host is Dennis Reinhardt. Our guest today is Tiffany Ridgeway, who is our elected Jackson County Auditor. She is eager to talk today about real estate tax. If you own real property, or if you have a child in school, or if you yourself are in school, you may find this topic important. We're going to try to go step by step so that we do not get swallowed up in details. Tiffany Ridgeway has served as Jackson County Auditor since 2019, following more than 15 years of service in the office where she began her career in 2003. An active member of the County Auditors Association of Ohio, CAAO, Tiffany has served in numerous leadership roles, including Southeast District, Secretary-Treasurer, Vice President, and now serving her fourth year as Southeast District President. She held a seat on the Executive Committee for 5 years and began a 2-year term as CAAO Secretary-Treasurer in January 2005. I believe that would be a state office in that organization. Tiffany lives in Jackson and is a proud mom. Her daughter is an occupational therapist with Decatur Township School District in Indiana, and her son is a teacher at Jackson Middle School. Tiffany considers herself a committed advocate for Jackson County, Southeast Ohio, and rural communities. So to start off the discussion, we had a rather comprehensive prep session yesterday, so we're going to try to use that, some of those ideas. The first question I have is, why do lots of people receive more than one tax bill at a time?
So the land in Jackson County, all over, is divided into what they consider parcels. And so how many ever parcels of property you own, that's why you get more bills.
Okay, if you own 5 parcels, you get 5 tax bills.
That's correct.
If you own 4 parcels, you get 4 tax bills. And does each parcel have a unique identifying number?
Yes, it's
Okay.
called a parcel number.
Called a parcel number, of course. And the idea is that a parcel is a chunk of land, usually that's developed through the history of the land. It might be a city residential lot, or residential lot in the city. It might be 5 acres. It might be 75 acres. It just depends on how that piece of land passed down through ownership.
Correct.
And if you have a survey done, is the surveyor required to plot out this parcel
Yes.
on the survey sketch?
Yes.
So
Yeah.
if there's a survey, you'll have a line right on the survey, and that represents the parcel.
Yes, that represents the parcel.
And is the surveyor required to place the parcel number right on the survey?
Yes, they are now.
They are now, right? And even if there isn't a survey, is a deed required to have the parcel number or parcel numbers on it?
Yes. Yes, all legal instruments should have a parcel number with a legal description.
And the last question really on parcel is, if you want to split a parcel of land and sell a piece off, do you have to have a survey?
Yes.
And I, as I pointed out yesterday, it wasn't always that way. Back when I started in medieval times, learning under such folks as Bud Douthit, a longtime attorney in Jackson, you could have a deed description where you start at the oak tree, you go north 50 feet, you go east 75 feet, more or less, and south and so on. And that's how you can mark out a rectangle of land you want to sell. No more, folks. Ever since Brian McPherson, who took office as county engineer in 1985 and served in that office for 25 years, Brian instituted a lot of reforms in Jackson County. Some of them involved requiring surveys to mark out the parcels and by drawing and also by number, so that the legal descriptions of the deeds jibe with the county tax records.
Correct.
And
yes.
That's important.
Yes, yes. And Brian and Ed Jarvis, who was the auditor at the time, they came up with conveyance standards and what is going to be, what would be required. And we still use those standards today. You think about the old oak tree. Well, what happens when that old oak tree falls over?
One of the things I brought up yesterday was a land dispute I had with a neighbor, and he was using an 1850 survey and saying it had precedence over the one I had that was like from 1974.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about which one would be recognized. You said yesterday.
Yeah, there are some. I like to think of myself as an old land lawyer. At least I'm an old lawyer. There are statutes that control that sort of question, and the one in question would be the 40-year Title Act, so that if you have what's called a root of title, which is a deed with at least 40 years of history, you start today and you go back 40 years, it's for a marketable Title Act.
Yeah.
And if you're able to establish that, then you have good title, even against that 1875 survey or whenever that was. So that these are some of the ways requiring good surveys, requiring consistent parcels, and the Marketable Title Act are the way that over time we get a more consistent and more sensible array of legal descriptions for land work. But that's a different topic from today.
Yeah, I told him, just last thing was, hey, you're going to have to go to court. And then he kind of dropped it and said, we'll walk and we'll agree where the line is at. You know?
Yeah, I was involved one time in a boundary dispute over, I think it was 15 feet. And these people spent so much money on that lawsuit to sit down and make a deal.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've established that the parcel is essentially the unit of taxation in Jackson County.
Yes.
How many taxable parcels are there in Jackson County?
So altogether, Jackson County has 28,993 parcels, and of that, there's 26,509 taxable parcels, and that does include public utilities.
Okay. So why aren't the non-taxable parcels taxed?
So non-taxable parcels are because they're owned by a public entity, so maybe a school district, maybe the county, can also be a church for the portion that the church actually sits on that's used for public worship. There's just, different
charitable purposes, like a museum.
Purposes,
we
museums.
have a couple of museums in the county.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
Are there conservation type things that come into
There
consideration
is.
also?
Yes, so there is. So we do have several parcels that are exempt because of that reason as well. There was just a big project not too long ago that was done by ARC, and all their parcels are
The new
tax
preserve.
exempt.
It's
Yeah.
gonna be
Lake
exempt.
Alma's exempt, Lake Catherine's
Yes,
exempt,
that's
Lake
correct.
Jackson's exempt.
Okay.
All those areas. So you keep track of them just in case they come back into private enterprise.
That's correct. We still have to go through the valuation process on them and keep track of them, because at some point in time, if their use changes, they'll go back into our tax base.
Okay, so how is a permanent parcel evaluated for tax purposes? Viewers, this is kind of an important question. This gets us started.
So each parcel is made up of course, your land and your structures that are on it. And we are tasked through the Ohio Revised Code and the state statutes that our value set on our parcels should be at market value. So the actual statute says that we should be between 90% and 110% of what the current housing market is.
And who says what the current market value is?
What your property is selling for these days. So, what it's between a willing buyer and a willing seller on an open market.
So you have contractors who establish that?
Yes. So some, in some counties in Ohio, they do it in-house. We're small, and you have to have certain requirements, of course, by the state. And so we do contract that out. I am very much involved. I'm very hands-on with that process, but I do have a contractor that helps me with that.
Okay.
Do utilities, some areas aren't developed. They don't have water. People own them. Others don't have a structure, but they have water and they have electric running to it. And that probably figures into
It does.
It
does. We have to separate out classifications of land. So whether you have woods or you have an acre that has utilities on it, that all goes into how we evaluate it, because it would sell differently.
Yeah.
So theoretically, you look at the history of sales to establish what the value of land is.
Yes.
The recent history of sales. I've got a tax bill here, and I noticed that what they're calling that on the tax bill, viewers, is the appraised value, would be the market value that we start with, appraised value. And that's what Tiffany just told us. The contract appraisers do that. And how often do they do that?
So every 6 years, we are tasked with going out and visiting every piece of property and doing a complete analysis of the entire parcel system. And then the third year in between that, we do what's called a triennial, and that's just basically market. We're only looking at those sales, the market sales.
Okay.
You were saying yesterday, people going out to appraised places sometimes run into situations.
Yes. So right now, every 6 years, we use aerial photography and different things like that, but we do boots, what I call boots on the ground. And years ago, it was a lister, a data collector, and they would go out with the property record card, and they would look at each building, and they would, mark off buildings that weren't there and put buildings on that was there, and measure your house again, and of course knock on your door and collect all the data that we need. Now we use photographers. So in my last reval, we had a team of photographers that came in and they did street level, took a picture of each side of your house and each building. And but it's dangerous these days, and so the state has looked into starting to allow us to use other means versus boots on the ground.
Did you have a story about how dangerous it is to do this kind of work?
So Pike County is on the same cycle as we are. Not every county in Ohio is on the same cycle. They are on the same cycle, and as we were out doing photography, they were also out doing photography. And one of the photographers was kidnapped, was pulled into a house by gunpoint and held for 8 hours. So it's dangerous.
It is. Like I was saying yesterday, a situation where I was out driving my Jeep, you like off-roading too, and I came up to this gate and the sign said, "Howdy, now get,"
Yeah.
So I was out
All
of
right,
there.
let's get back to business for a minute.
Yeah.
I'm taking a look at this tax bill copy here, and under appraised value, it's got the phrase taxable value. Could you explain to us what relationship taxable value has to appraised value?
The taxable value is 35% of the appraised value or market value. And the taxable value is the base that we use to calculate your tax bill.
Well, by calculate your tax bill, you multiply that times the tax rate.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And why 35%?
It's the convenience of the work that we do with our millage rates.
The number of mills looks
Yeah.
better if it's 30.
Yeah.
If you start out with 35%
Right.
than if you start out with 100%. But there's no magic to it. That's just what they chose.
Yep, that's just what they chose. And there's legislation in to change that, but that will totally change our system too.
Okay, so we have this line here on the taxable value.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if we add up all the taxable values on all the tax bills for all those tens of thousands of parcels, what number do we come up with?
$1,050,711,670.
Viewers, you're in $1 billion county. I didn't know that. You learn stuff, don't you?
Yeah,
when
you
go through
do every time.
Yeah. And if you, 35%, that's about a third. So if you multiply that by approximately 3, it's more or less a $3 billion market value county.
That's correct. And that includes public utilities, and that includes your commercial properties, your residential, your agricultural. It includes everything.
Okay, now let's get down to the tax part. I'm using the word mill. Can you explain to us what a mill is?
It's $1 per thousand.
Per thousand what?
Taxable value.
Dollar per $1,000 of taxable value.
Yep. And that's what a mill is, and that's what we consider as part of your tax rate. So every levy that is put on, a mill is the term we use for the rate.
Yeah, if you're doing arithmetic, it's decimal, it's .001
That's correct.
is of a dollar is a mill.
Yep.
Tenth of a cent.
Yep.
Okay, and that's yay many mills times the taxable value yields the tax for that tax bill.
Correct.
Okay. Now let's look a little bit about the way the taxes are derived. What entities assess real estate tax?
So you have the county, and your county is made up of senior citizens, EMS, Department of Disability.
All those odds and ends levies.
Yes, all those odds and end levies. And then your school districts, the township you live in, or city that you live in, or municipality. And then, of course, the joint vocational school as well.
Okay. Again, on my handy dandy tax bill, I've got current tax distribution, and that says Jackson County. That's those odds and ends tax levies we're talking
correct.
about. Jackson City School, everybody knows the city schools is on there. Jackson Corporation and Joint Vocational School District,
Yep.
and got a line for special assessment, but thankfully that's zero. Now, mine says a lot about Jackson because I'm a Jackson resident. If I were in Wellston, would I have different designation on this current tax distribution?
Yes. So where you see Jackson City Schools on your tax bill, somebody who lives in Wellston is going to see Wellston City Schools, and then if they live in the city limits of Wellston, they're going to see the city of Wellston or Wellston Corporation versus Jackson Corporation.
So those various entities have various millages for real estate tax, and you add them all up together, and that's the number on the tax bill.
That's correct. So we call each one of those entities taxing authorities. So each taxing authority has their own millage rate, and then collectively together, that would be your district's tax rate.
And you guys have it all sorted out so that the Wellston folks don't pay Jackson tax, and
That's
Jackson
correct.
folks don't pay Wellston tax.
That's correct.
What did you say yesterday about the two schools when you were comparing them as far as the millage being different or the amount of
Yeah, I think you
taxing?
told us what was the highest millage, what was the lowest millage, remember?
Yeah. So the highest millage in the county is the Village of Colton's district, and they're at 61.55. So that would be the Village of Colton, the Joint Vocational School, Wellston City School District in the county. And the lowest one is actually Lick Township, Wellston School District, and they're at 37.1. So that's going to be Lick Township, Wellston City School District, the Joint Vocational, and the county.
So when you say 37.1, you say 37.1 mills.
Mills, that's correct.
And then we do that multiplication, and that's how we derive the
Yep.
real estate tax. Okay. And different taxpayers in different parts of the county have different taxes that they pay.
Yes.
And
Yes.
it's the job of your office to keep that all sorted out.
Yes. Yes.
You know, yesterday we were talking about abandoned properties too, how the county handles that. How do you handle it? You try to find the owner, and if you can't find the owner, what do you do?
So
I guess everybody else gets a tax bill in the mail.
right. So tax bills are calculated on an annual basis. We send those bills out twice a year, and you have the choice the first half to pay the full year or a half a year. And then if you only pay the half a year, of course, you're going to get it the other half a year.
And then Dennis's question.
And then the owner is identified because we use the deed of records, from the recorder's office. So we know the owner, but of course we don't always know where to send a tax bill. People move, people pass away, properties become abandoned. And so those ones, the bills are generated, but they may not necessarily be sent out because we don't know. After they get returned so many times, we don't send them anymore.
Now, you keep track of the owners in part because every time there's a deed, before it's recorded, if there's a transfer of ownership, it has to go through your office.
That's correct.
So that it's a two-stop process. First auditor second recorder, and if there's a problem with the legal description, it might go over to the engineer
That's correct. Yep.
to resolve any problems that way.
Yes.
And I think you indicated yesterday that taxpayers have an obligation to keep you guys informed of what their address is.
Yes, yes. So the state legislature at some point in time put in place that it is up to the taxpayer. It is their responsibility to make sure that we have a current address for tax bills, and it's also their responsibility to make sure their taxes are paid.
Sure. Now, if they don't, I've seen these advertisements in the newspaper that the county can actually sell land for a tax bill.
That's correct. We can.
Yeah. And what that means actually legally is that it's like a mortgage.
It is.
It's, I think what they call it is first and best lien, because it goes on January 1st of every year, and it's for the amount of the tax owing, I think probably plus interest. Mm-hmm. And if there's a sale, then that real estate tax, if there's any old real estate tax, has to be paid or accounted for. And usually that's how the real estate tax is paid. And if somebody slips through the cracks and doesn't disclose themselves, maybe somebody dies and the ownership flies off to 15 different heirs or something like that, and nobody does an estate. So the land can get fall through the cracks, and sometimes the prosecutor has to sell the real property for the tax owing on it, and that happens, and we see that in the newspaper too. So viewers, that's what that one's all about.
Yes. So the first year it becomes delinquent, it is advertised. And the second year it's delinquent, then at that point in time, it's in the prosecutor's hands, and he can decide on how to move forward from it.
Tiffany, up to this point, you've been talking about kind of local issues, the EMS issues in the school district and the senior citizens and all those kinds of things. These are local kind of problems, aren't they? And many times you run a levy on the ballot and people actually vote for it, for real estate tax. Can the state government run a local tax levy?
No.
Can the federal government run a local tax levy?
No.
The locals run local tax levies.
That's correct. All property taxes stay here locally.
Okay. Now, the reason you're here, I think, is that the valuations, these every 6-year valuations, keep going up. Would you describe that, please?
Yeah, so like I said, the valuation that we set for tax purposes is supposed to be within that 90 to 110% of what the market is doing. And the housing market is on the rise, and it has been for several years. So as the housing market goes up, so does the valuations for property tax purposes.
And it had been going up a lot.
It has been going up a lot.
So it's arithmetic. Mm-hmm. You start out with the taxable value times the millage equals the tax, and if the millage stays the same but the taxable value goes up, what happens to the amount of tax?
It goes up.
Goes up, and that's what people are seeing.
And just to clarify that just a little bit, so if the valuation goes up, let's say on a residential piece of property, in my last reval, the valuation went up 26.4% on a residential home on the average in our county. That doesn't mean your tax bill goes up that much. So you have two different types of millage that goes into the calculation of a tax bill. You have inside millage and you have the voted millage. And your voted millage, until when it goes on, I have to certify how much the collection is going to be. And there's a House Bill 920 is what it was called back when it was passed, that keeps a district, a taxing authority, from collecting any more than what they said they needed when they put it on the ballot.
So they vote for a wad of money.
That's correct. Basically, yes.
Yeah, it's expressed as maybe 5 mils or something like that, but that's a wad of money.
Right. And the only increase to that they would receive is if there was new construction. But on the flip side of that, if there was a bunch of destruction in that district, then they would adjust it down as well. So that's called reduction factors. And then
so you start out with, say, 5 mils, and then you adjust that over the course of the 5-year levy?
it is adjusted by the state in reduction factors down so that they're only collecting. So as the valuation goes up, they're still only collecting what they said they needed.
Okay, that stays steady.
Right.
But that's the voted
That's
levy.
the
And then there's real property tax. That's the so-called inside.
Inside millage. So every property owner has a 10 mil limitation of inside millage. So no property owner can pay more than 10 mils of inside millage. And that is divided among each taxing authority. So each, the school district, the county, all together, when you add all their inside millage, can't be more than 10. So not every property owner in Jackson County has a 10 mil inside millage, because if somebody didn't take the full that they needed, we have some that are still at like 8.8 and then up to 10.
But the inside millage, there's no limit on that.
As far as collection goes, no. So if you see a 26% increase in your valuation, there's going to be a 26% increase in the inside millage portion.
Tax attributable to the inside millage.
Yep.
I know you were talking about inflation. We all get hit with inflation. How's the county get hit with inflation, and how does that have a bearing on things?
Right. So inside millage was created as a steady, stable tax increase. We always knew that money was coming in, and it was for things like for inflation, the rising cost of providing the services that we have to provide.
You gave an example of that fire truck.
Yes. So yesterday I gave the example of the fire truck. So 5 years ago, a fire truck cost between $450,000 and $500,000. That same fire truck today costs $980,000. So, we have costs that we have to keep up just to provide the basic services and the services that we've been providing for years. So that inside millage was created to help us offset those costs. But because the housing market has been rising so quickly, the housing market is above what inflation is in some areas and in some aspects.
Okay. Now, we know that sometimes the one levy that you vote for doesn't cover the need, and you have to have the same levy again. Mm-hmm. And that's either a replacement levy or a renewal levy. We've heard those two phrases. Mm-hmm. What do they mean? What do those phrases mean?
So a renewal levy, it means that it's renewing the levy based on the amount that they said they originally needed when they first passed the levy. So if you passed the levy in 1990, let's say, and you just continue to renew it every 5 years, then it's still based on the need that you needed in 1990.
Same money.
Same money. A replacement means now we need to base it on our need today. What do we need to collect today? So we use so then the reduction factors start all over again, because now it's saying I need this amount versus this amount.
Yeah, for the new 5-year levy.
Right,
yeah.
right, correct.
So theoretically, successive replacement levies can kind of climb the escalator up as the land values go up.
Correct.
Okay.
And it's somewhat confusing for taxpayers to know the difference, and so I always say, call us and let us explain it.
Or when we campaign for senior citizens levy, we always say, same money.
That's right. And I always tell the taxing authority that, like, if you're doing a renewal versus a replacement, make sure you know, so that you can campaign that way.
Sure. So what people are feeling, I think, is that they have the increased real estate tax attributable to increased land values, but all they have to do to pay an increased tax is just own the real estate, own the land.
That's correct.
And they don't necessarily have any increased cash to pay the increased tax.
That's
so
correct.
They can get in the middle there. If this were an increase in income tax, theoretically, at least you have an increased income to pay the tax with. Or if it were an increase in sales tax, you'd have the option not to buy the item at sale. But if you own your home, you're stuck.
That's correct. I mean, we're basing a value for every piece of property in the county based upon what the current housing market is doing for the county. But that is saying that, well, because my neighbor's house sold for this much, my house is going to sell for this much. And you don't know that. It's subjective, right? It's subjective. And so, yeah, we're making assumptions.
Okay, you're a local government official, and you kind of keep your eyes open to what's going on. How serious do you think this problem is?
Oh, it's a problem. Our property tax system is in desperate need of reform. I am very concerned about keeping our taxpayers in their homes. Our most vulnerable taxpayers, our senior citizens, our disabled. How do we keep them in their homes? Because the property values are skyrocketing, and you have people who are on fixed incomes who can't afford the increase in the taxes. They're not planning on selling their home. They're planning on staying there until they pass away, and they cannot afford the rise in these taxes. And it is a real problem.
Now, you've got some proposals that we're going to get to in a minute, but first I want to talk about the constitutional amendment.
Okay.
Is there a constitutional amendment flying about?
Yes, there is petitions going around for signature to put on the ballot to abolish property taxes altogether.
By that you mean the real estate tax?
The real estate taxes, yes.
Just do away with it.
Just do away with it.
No more real estate tax.
No more real estate
And
taxes.
your point is, as I understand it, if you're in your home and you're facing real estate taxes that you can't pay and might force you out of your home, how are you going to vote on that amendment?
Exactly. But then, do you want EMS to show up when you need help? Do you want the police to show up when you need help? Do you want a senior center to be available for Meals on Wheels and community activities? Do you want your school district? Do you want a public school district? So it's a very dangerous thing when you talk about completely overhauling the entire system and abolishing property taxes.
Do they have a plan to replace it?
There is no plan. So I've talked to them. I've talked to several that are passing this petition around. And my first question to them is, how are we going to replace the revenue for the services that we have to have?
By the way, how much revenue is that in Jackson County over a year?
It's over $41 million.
$41 million. How do you replace $41 million to pay for essential local services?
That's correct. That's
And their
correct.
answer?
The state will have to figure it out. I talked to one that has been very, very boisterous about it, has done lots of meets and greets to get people to sign petitions. And I had an hour conversation with him. And all he kept telling me was, well, the state will have to figure it out. Well, the state will have to figure it out.
But there's always downstream consequences.
There
If
is.
you use a sales tax or if you use an income tax. And the sales tax affects lower income groups more than it does.
That's correct.
Because wealthier people.
Because lower income people are spending more of their money on taxable sales than what a higher income person may be.
Yeah.
So all you're doing is you're beating up on the little
You're
guy
shoving
even
it
more.
off onto them. That's what you're doing.
That's
Yeah.
correct. That's
Yeah.
correct. And I put the math to it. I wanted to see the numbers. Like, what would a sales tax have to be in Jackson County to make up that difference? And we're talking about, currently we have a 7.25% sales tax. 1.5% of that is the counties. 5.75% is the states. We would have to have an additional 8.32%. So we're looking at a 15.67% sales tax in Jackson County if we went straight sales tax, just to produce what we currently collect now. Doesn't help for any future services, doesn't help for inflation. That's what Jackson County would have to be. And then think about, we're not a tourist state. So that revenue is coming from us, not from outsiders coming in to visit. And then we have 28 counties in Ohio that are border counties to another state. It'll be just as easy for them to go across the border and do all their shopping for
Well, a lot of
cheaper.
people go to the Huntington
Yeah.
Mall anyway.
Right, and we're not even considered a border county.
Right.
So, you think about that.
How much revenue you'll
Right,
lose.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And-
Now, Aggie brought up something yesterday about the sales tax. Like when you go into a restaurant, you're charged a sales tax, and then when you leave and take out, you're not. And she brought up that aspect and said, would that be a way of making up some of that if you also taxed the food that was leaving, the dining place?
I think everything can be on the table.
Yeah.
Especially if you're talking about completely
On the table, so to
overhauling.
speak.
Yeah, so to speak. Especially if you're talking about overhauling the entire system. They will have to take a hard look at at what is exempt from sales tax. Because we need revenue, and to have revenue, you need a wider tax base. So each exemption lowers that tax base, which means then the percentage we have to pay is a little bit higher.
Also, something you brought up yesterday that was kind of interesting to me is the school districts do have an alternative.
They do. They can put an income tax on versus a property tax levy. Yep.
So that would result in increased income tax. So you'd have federal, state, and school district. And if you live in City of Jackson, you could have 4 levels of income tax.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right.
That's correct.
And the state's cutting back on things, and how would that affect the schools right now?
So, locally, the state provides money for the school districts in the school formula, and they provide money to the local taxing authorities of like the county and the township and the city by what's called a local government fund, and it's based on state revenues. But they continue to cut how much they're willing to push down to the local level. And as they cut that, then what do us taxing authorities have to do? We need to produce the income because we have services that we have promised and that our community wants, has voted in.
I think you had numbers on that, didn't you, from the state?
How much they're
subsidizing
cutting
education?
back in percentages?
Right. So in the state, a couple years ago, it was the state provided 40. I think it was 42%. They are down to 37% this year, and I believe that they're going to. In the next 2 years, it's supposed to be 32%.
The Lions budget says 32%.
Yes.
This in the face of a provision in the Constitution of the state of Ohio that says the state shall provide a public education.
That's correct. That's absolutely correct. Instead of providing the public education that they are supposed to be providing us, they are cutting us.
Okay, so with that cheery note, let's move on. let's move on to your organization. I know you county auditors, kind of a brain trust, sit and try to think what can we do. And you yesterday you came up with, I think it was 3 ideas that you had that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. So as a organization, no one knows the tax system more than we do as county auditors. And we also face the taxpayers every day, and we understand what they need to get some relief, right? And so one of the things that we have talked about is the school, when you talk about school formula and you talk about the local dollars that go to the school based on your property taxes, and we talked about those reduction factors and how it brings it down. Well, the schools get a floor, so they can't go below a 20 mil floor. So when you see a 26% increase in your value, if the schools are at their floor, then they do receive a 26% increase. And so what we propose is, they have inflationary costs too, just like we do, but probably not 26%, right? So what we say is we're still going to give them an increase every year based on the percentage of inflation, we're going to index it to inflation, instead of them having the flat 20 mil floor where they're going to see that full 26%
Yeah.
increase.
There's no real logical linkage between a school's budget and the price of land.
Right,
or
in the real
price of
estate market,
buildings.
right.
Yeah, which could be a bubble, it could be unrealistic. But of course, there is a linkage in their budget with the rate of inflation, because
Right.
everybody has to pay
Right,
inflation.
right. There-
So what you're saying is, let's peg it to inflation and let's get away from the housing market.
That's correct. That's correct.
So, and the way, as you've explained it, the way it is now, it's a function of the housing market, and there's no particular reason and logic for that to be.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
You talked about an idea of handling the most vulnerable people, some sort of system that would, allow them to.
Yeah. So currently we have what's called homestead exemption, and it's for senior citizens 65 years of age or older, or disabled. You have to be 100% disabled. And right now there's an income guideline, and it's $40,000 of taxable income, and you get $26,000 exempted from what you have to pay taxes on. It averages about $350 or so in our county
In tax savings.
in tax savings, but not a lot of people qualify. So our proposal would be that we expand that program. We expand the income guideline, and we expand how much you get off. If you just think about even just doubling it, so people get $700 off. Our most vulnerable people get $700 off. That would be tremendous to them. It would really give them some tax relief, and that money is made up, is reimbursed to us by the state currently. So no taxing authority would have a dollar loss, and it would not raise anybody else's taxes because they're getting an exemption.
So in effect, the state's general fund would subsidize the local governments
That's
to
correct.
make up for the homestead exemption increase.
That's correct. That's correct. And this is not a new program. This program has been around for years, and it has always been reimbursed by the state. But back in 2014, what they said was, now it's homestead and owner occupancy credit and non-business rollback, which we're going to talk about as well. And those three programs are all reimbursed by the state, but now all of our levies now qualify, because in 2014 they changed that levies, not all levies qualify. Any new levy after 2014 doesn't qualify for the reimbursement for owner occupancy and non-business credit. So your non-business credit was a 10%.
I think we need to back up a little bit and explain what
Okay.
these credits are, please.
Well, I was going to get there. So homestead, I explained exactly what homestead was, and that goes on every levy, and everybody gets
I think
that.
folks know homestead. There are a lot of folks
Yeah.
out there get homestead. So
Yes.
if
So-
you increase that, that would be a direct assistance.
It would be a direct assistance to our most vulnerable citizens. Yes. Now, your non-business rollback is a rollback that you get for your property that you're not using as a business, hence non-business rollback, right? And again, it is reimbursed by the state. And then your owner occupancy is, I own my home and I live in my home, and you qualify for that. Non-business rollback is 10%, or it was supposed to be 10%, and owner occupancy is 2.5%. So not a lot, but it's a little bit, and it is a tax program that does give a little bit of a credit to taxpayers. Taxing authorities are made whole by the state, but what they did was in 2014 they said, this is getting too expensive for us, so any new levies after 2014 no longer qualify for that. So if you have a lot of levies on the books for that was after 2014, you're not getting that credit. So it's no longer a full 10% and 2.5%.
So you'd like to expand that as well?
So what I would like, what our organization has proposed is, non-business credit should be for just that, non-business credit. So housing authorities, let me back up. Every piece of property is classified commercial, industrial, residential, or agricultural. So to get the non-business credit, it has to be residential or agricultural. And it's how that piece of property would sell on the open market. That's how we're classifying it. Highest and best use of the property. So we have housing groups that own these houses, or landlords that might own lots of rental properties. They're using it as a business, but because they're residential pieces of property, they're still getting that 10% rollback. Somebody who may own an Airbnb or a short-term rental, they are getting that 10% even though they're using it as a business, because the highest and best use of that property is residential. And so the first thing we want to do is let's change that classification. If you're using it as a rental, as a business, then let's take that 10% away from them, and that's going to open up our tax base a little bit more.
Okay.
Do you have anybody in your corner for these ideas at the State House, or what's the general?
Good question.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there a general acceptance of it, or what?
So, there's several legislators who are up there and they understand the system, but then there's several that don't. And, we have a couple good, there's all kinds of bills out there, all kinds of bills being introduced almost daily about how to fix the tax problem. The problem is when you mess with one part, right, it's going to affect another part. And not every legislator sees the whole picture. I guess that's how I'm going to describe that. But we do have a couple who are very familiar with the tax system and are trying to help. They're trying to lead the charge. And
well, let's identify the good guys.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm going to say Representative Hoops. He's from Henry County, and he is a great person for our association, and is very helpful to us and listens to us and has introduced several of our bills.
How do you spell his last name?
Hoops, Hoops.
Hoops.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there's a Representative Troy who totally understands the program. And don't ask me where he's from, because I don't know, because he's not from our little realm. But he understands it. Now, I wouldn't tell you he has introduced any of our bills, but he understands it. And he's on the committees that hear the bills, and he can speak very intelligently and fluently about what needs to be done. Representative Jason Stevens, he understands it. He was a county auditor. He was a county commissioner, from our area. He gets it. So we have a few, but if you've never worked in that realm of property taxes and really have seen, if that's not your expertise, it's hard to understand the complete system.
Well, we're finding that out today. And in some respects, it is hard to understand. Mm-hmm. Has there been any progress in the legislature?
No. I'm going to say no. I'm going to say we had 20 some bills introduced last year, and they last General Assembly, they went nowhere. We had, I can't even tell you how many bills, good and bad, that was introduced this go round. And what was passed by the Senate and the House was vetoed by the governor. And now there's a working group. The governor's put together a working group, and they're trying to figure it out to make recommendations to the General Assembly and to the governor, and hopefully we get somewhere. There are 2 county auditors that are sitting on that working group. Are there any auditors on that group? There is 2. The governor did appoint 2, and so we're hopeful. We're hopeful. Are we there? No. Are we close?
Has your organization
No.
been able to give testimony before?
Oh, yes. We're up. There's one of us that's up there quite often.
Yeah.
And we work very diligently and very hard. We've done a lot of tax briefings, tax relief briefings. What can we do to lower this tax? Because quite frankly, property owners cannot afford it. They just can't. They cannot afford where we're at. And we got here for lots of reasons, but the state is really great about blaming the local level. These are local dollars. They're local, they were local services that are wanted. They were voted on. But when the original levy went on, we were getting more money from the state, and we were providing services that the cost keeps going up on. And we didn't put these property tax levies on because we were getting other revenue somewhere else. You keep cutting us. So we have no choice but to go back to the property owner.
Okay, I think we understand a little bit better now than we did before. Appreciate it. Do you have any final remarks,
Yeah, so
Tiffany?
as you get your tax bill and as you have questions, my first thing I want to say is call us. Call us. Let us explain it to you. If you don't think your value is right, let us know. We want to be 100% right on that value. So if you have questions, if you think something's wrong, there's appeals processes, there's things we can look at and do. So
There is a process to
Yes.
adjust that.
There is a process to adjust it. So the first thing I'm going to say is don't ever hesitate to call. Come in, look at our website. I'm willing to talk to anybody. That's the first thing I want to say. And then the second thing I'm going to say is reach out to your representatives, your state representative, your state senator, anybody that you can reach out at the state level that can make policy changes. You need to reach out to them. I don't create policy. I don't set policy. Everything I do is governed by a Ohio Revised Code. But there are people who can change it, and you've got to reach out to them. If it's important to you, if you are afraid you're being taxed out of your home, you need to reach out. They have to hear from you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Dennis?
One of the things that came out of this that I think is very important is that you are here trying to help these people. It's not just like somebody just collecting money without thinking about the consequences. And your organization is also looking for solutions. And we thank you for that. And I want people to understand that you're trying to help them with this too.
Thank you. I am. It's very near and dear to my heart.
We can tell. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that'll do it for the day.